ample warning. The whole system has to work on trust. Now, occasionally, we'll all try a little trick to try and win a vote or make them look silly. I had 10 years in opposition as a whip. I think we managed to beat the government 3 times. And actually it was nothing to do with us, it was them being stupid. But we like to take the credit. But the whole time you have to watch out for ambushes or something, and you think there's nobody around here much. The other side said, well, we're going home, we're not voting, and you think, aha, but are they hanging about outside? And we did try it. I wasn't a whip, it was just after I came in about 97, 98. You can imagine the morale of the Conservative Party was pretty low. It got absolutely hammered in the 97 election. There were, I can't remember, 165 MPs. Conservative morale was really poor. And the then Chief Whip and Deputy Chief Whip plotted that the party would look as if it's gone home. And they put on, various people who lived nearby had sort of drinks parties or something like that. And at 10:30, we all trooped in. And we would have won had not a smaller party suddenly panicked and voted with the government. But it wasn't an particularly important measure. Actually, it was the Deputy Chief Whip's local area, which is why we were doing it. But from the point of view, even though we didn't win, from a morale point of view, it was incredibly good. And there is an element of that you can imagine, you've got, as we have now, 305 Conservative MPs. And they are all different. They've all got their own views. And you've got to try and get a team spirit going, because that is actually what makes them vote. The old ideas that we're going to strong arm somebody or threaten them with this or that, if it ever existed, it certainly doesn't now. The only way you can do it is by engendering a team spirit. Now, the other thing we do, which is the side that isn't really heard of, is, and people might sometimes laugh, but it's actually very true, it's a pastoral kind. We have groups of MPs split up. It's been sort of regionally and things. I've just, in order so we can take more note of them, I've just taken on all the junior ministers. And we will chat to them. We'll have them in what we call a flock. I think we're calling them groups now, because flocks, I don't know, it's a bit old hat or something. But the idea is that you get to know your flock. You get to know them politically, if you like. So you've got a fair idea what will excite them, what will irritate them, where they might be having problems with government policy or party policy if you're in opposition. But also know what the problems are. There's all sorts of problems. MPs, despite popular legend, are actually human beings, and they're subject to exactly the same problems. In fact, sometimes more so than if you took an equivalent number of people in a bigger enterprise. The long hours, the not going home. I'm very lucky, I go home every night. It's just, that's not a problem. But you can imagine, as I was leaving tonight, I was saying cheerio to one of my colleagues in the Whip's office. He's got to go down to the far end of Pembrokeshire tonight, and he's got to come back on Sunday. He's got a young family, and that's tough. And that's not the most difficult journey by any means. So we've got to get to know them. We've got to get their trust, because the worst thing that happens, and now again it does happen, is something goes wrong. We want them to know that they can come to us with their problems, whether it's personal, or obviously there's quite a lot of medical problems. And again, MPs don't like to admit to medical problems. They see it as a sign of weakness, that somehow or other, that there's always a group of people anxious to take their seats off them, and I'm not talking about the other parties. And so any sign that they're in any way not up to it physically or whatever, they don't like to give, and that can be a big strain. You may have seen in the paper last week we had a debate on mental health, and 2 MPs said they'd had problems. Well, I can tell you it's not just 2. And I have I have come across now in my new role as Deputy Chief Whip since we became government, I have nearly all of their problems heaped on me. And it's quite difficult sometimes. Some of the things I hear about are not what I would say anybody from Metro land or suburbia should ever have to hear. It's certainly for inner London and strange places there are. But I have to say, I am now not going to be surprised by anything I hear. But it is important because they've got to feel that somebody's listening to them. And that's not just personally, it's politically as well. Our main role really is to transmit, to receive from our members, and then transmit either through myself and the Chief Whip, or sometimes just the Chief Whip, in government across to not just Secretaries of State, but actually through to the Prime Minister. So that's on political issues, but it's also personnel. And a lot of these people don't realise when they first come in that actually we are watching their progress and we will make recommendations. They're not always listened to because life in Parliament is not always based entirely on those things. There are other considerations. You have to have different wings of a party or so on and so forth. But that's what we do. And every day, again, if you watch the Parliament channel, you will see on both sides a person sitting on the front bench with a folder. And in that folder, they're writing something. And what they're doing is actually not describing like Hansard what's being said, but actually a report on how people are saying it. Now, sometimes you don't, you might say the usual stuff, or you don't have to put anything new. But if somebody has done particularly well or particularly poorly, and it also applies on the other side, because we've got to know our enemy, if you like. You've got to know. Don't ever disregard them, so we know what's going on. Nobody's allowed to see that book except the whips. There was one instance. The only Prime Minister in recent time who actually was a whip was John Major. So he knew what went on. And apparently, after he finished Prime Minister's question, he went up to the whip on duty, as we call it, whip on bench, grabbed the whip's bench book, where the whip had written, Prime Minister, not very good this week. Which shows you we do write. We write for internal consumption. He said something like, no, I don't think I was that good this week. But that's what it's there for. And so that's just part of it. The final part is that we have a whip, not myself or the Chief Whip, in each department. And our job there is to get legislation through. And this is the thing that I didn't know this until we got into government. We have to work out how many days we're going to have to discuss this, whether there's going to be what sort of controversy there might be. We pick the committees on our side, we choose the number of people, because there's a rigid, if we have 16, Labour have 14 or something like that, we have to try and represent views of our party. So if there's a couple of people who are not so happy, we might put one of them on. It's risky business, but it should be done. And we have to go to meetings, probably make some departments once a day, to actually talk with the other ministers about what's going on, because actually whips are ministers. My rank there are three ranks of minister. There's a Secretary of State, there's a Minister of State, and an Under Secretary of State. I'm the middle one, a Minister of State. But luckily, nobody ever really knows. But that's what we are, but we don't have departments as such. Finally, reference to the Treasurer of Her Majesty's household. I don't know how this has happened over the years. The Chief Whip is actually the official title is Secretary to the Treasury and Patronage Secretary. We don't have so much patronage, virtually none, makes life difficult. I'm the next one down, I'm the Treasurer, then you have the Controller of Her Majesty's household and the Vice-Chamberlain. The Vice-Chamberlain, every day, writes a message to the Queen about what has gone on. And we are assured that she reads it. In fact, we know she does. There's actually been some some leakage of that in the Daily Mail, I think, or Sunday Mail, or somebody's written something about one of the previous ones. So he does that. He goes down regularly to the palace to get Queen's assent or royal assent, and has to come back and do a lot of nodding and bowing in the chamber. Otherwise, my role is simply garden parties. I'm armed with Buckingham Palace garden party. I'm armed with an umbrella and a top hat, and I just go and talk to people who quickly understand that I'm not a member of the aristocracy, but they think I'm some sort of bodyguard or something. Not a very good one. And this is the bonus, is I get to ride in a carriage at the state opening of Parliament from Buckingham Palace to the Parliament and back again, while the poor old Vice-Chamberlain is kept hostage in Buckingham Palace for the safe return of the monarch. These days he gets some sandwiches and a gin and tonic, I understand, and then we take him back. So that's roughly what we do.